Hello viewers, welcome to CodeForAny. Fruit markets, backends, and app API insight. Today need to develop this here the item nutritions add, update, deletes, and list API we need to develop here. First of all, we need to create here the API, or we need to write down here the app dot post, and we need to call this here the slash dot API slash admins slash, and to give this name here the item nutritions, we need to set this here the API name nutrition add, and we need to write here the request, and like this we need to set here. Now we need to add this here the nutritions as a multiple entry we need to add here, or this here the insert times here, and we need to one by one subdate and delete, so need to possibles like this need to where need to follow here, because need to reduce this here the API calls for the items addings, and to reduce this here the database connections. That's why need to one times all information gatherings, and then after need to directly call this here the API, and we need to save this here. So like here the particulars items here the related to fruit inside the many components add here the like vitamins, uh, ions, like carbohydrates like this, anything, so need to add a list out, so need to set here, and to give directly here the database, we need to like internal logics need to set here, need to write down here. First of all, need to write down here the helper dot dlogs, and we need to print this here request body, request dot body like this need to print here, need to save this here the request object is equal to request dot body, like so need to set this here the parameters, so need to configure here and to set this here the this data. Now I need to create here the check here the access token, so need to configure this here and to pass this here the request dot headers, and we need to set this here the response, we need to configure this here and to set this here the callbacks, like we need to configures, and we need to check this here the access tokens, we need to checking here the other API. Maybe here address list inside, maybe here not put it, need to check here the direct database, need to use this here the type 3 for here the set here the nutrition conditions, so need to apply here, and also need to item sets, we need to set this here these conditions is most important for this API call, set here 3 like here, so need to configures, and then after so need to call this here the helper check parameter variables functions, need to call this here the response, we need to pass this here, then after request objects, and we need to check this here the parameters, we need to first of all the needs here the item ID or the which specific item inside need to add this nutrition, so need to given this here, then after so need to write down here the nutrition list we need to provide this here nutrition list, like we need to add here, and the two parameters this nutrition list we need to get here the JSON string, and we need to convert into the JSONs, and JSON then to using this here the for each loops, and to inserting this data inside the database, like internal logic we need to apply here. Now after this verify we need to get here the blank callbacks, we need to getting here. Now we need to write down here the if error, need to not if, we need to call this here the where an object is equal to, we need to get this here the JSONs dot parse, and we need to give this here the request object dot, so need to call this here the nutrition list, we need to set here, and we need to get this here the parsing data we need to get here. Now we need to prepare here the SQL query, we need to write down here, we need to write down here the db dot query, and we need to call this here the insert query. Now we need to open this here the MySQL's here's insert, and maybe you need to wrong tables. You need to go here like here, and to select this here the nutrition details, and to go SQLs, and we need to insert where you need to needs here. Now need to remove this here the nutrition ID. Also need to remove here the status, and we need to need these columns put here, and we need to set here the one common question marks because we need to enter here the multiples value inside the database. That's why I need to like this. We need to write down here the query, and we need to use here. And now we need to pass this here the value of these variables. We need to set here the array brackets inside the multiples value. We need to array need to give this here, and query we need to give this here the errors and results. We need to returning here for these callback functions like here's, and then after we need to write down here if gets any errors, then to helper dot throw HTML errors, and to call this here the errors and response, and to return these functions. Now we need to call this here if gets here the results means successfully added inside the database, and to response dot JSON. So we need to returning this here, and we need to call this here the status set here one, and we need to give this here the message, and we need to set this here the message as you need to set here the nutrition added successfully message need to write here, and to returning this years else parts we need to fail response need to given this years. Now need to copy and paste, need to set here the fails, need to write down here the msg fail message need to print here. Now need to calling this here the for each loops need to develop here, and to save this array of the value need to add object is equal to need to create here the blank array. We need to configure this here for the array here. Now need to call this here the for each loop, need to give this here the n object, and need to call here the for each loop. So need to call like this here and this value, and need to get this here the nutrition object. So need to get this here the nutri object, like we need to get here, and we need to add this here the objects inside. We need to push methods we need to call here, and we need to write down here the brackets inside. Need to inserting this here the array value. We need to given this here the request objects. First one is the item id. We need to pass for this array item underscore id, and then after we need to give this here the nutritions objects value dot name. Otherwise we need to set this here the database columns names is good. We need to check here's name property. We need to set this here the nutri, maybe like this, fix this here the here, and we need to inserting like this data here the for each. Now need to creating here, and we need to give this here the array objects. We need to pass here for this value. You need to set here and to configure this data here, and we need to adding this all data and insert this here. This is the right way to codings for the multiples entry inside the database. This is the batch inserts you need to making using here the JSON string. Need to write down like this here the API, and we need to save, and this API items nutrition sets API we need to done here. So now need to develop this here the nutritions item nutrition update API we need to develop here. Need to write down here app dot post, and we need to pass this here the slash API admin slash item nutritions updates API we need to develop here update, and now we need to give this here the parameters request response, like we need to set this here. Now we need to print this here the helper dot delogs. Need to write down here the request dot body, where request object is equal to request dot body, and now we need to call this here the check access tokens request dot headers, and we need to write down here the response, and we need to check this here the callbacks need to get this here the user objects if valid here's, then to get here like this callback events, need to returning these here's, and to check here's make any mistake here's, need to user objects need to forgets, and need to put this here's. Then after we need to making here the check parameters using this here the helpers, and to call this here the check parameters valid functions. We need to call here and need to write down like this here the response objects, give this here the request object, and to check parameters names need to pass this array inside. We need to need this here the nutrition ID. We need to given this here, so need to copy here's nutritions and to give this here the ID, and then after need to need this here the name property, because need to specify this nutrition names need to update, that's why we need to call this like here the name property we need to need here. If here this parameters found, then to get this here the blank callbacks. If you not found, then to direct automatically you need to send this response and to terminate these connections for the servers, and we need to save this here. Now save here, now need to call this here the db, and need to call this here the update query, need to again write down here, need to go here updates, need to nutrition id items not or edited item id, need to remove this here the status also not managing here the modify here, give this here the comma modify dates is equal to, need to write down here the now functions need to call here equal to, and we need to set here the question mark, and also need to cut this here the value against this name like here's, and set like this property, and to check here the status is not equal to deleted, like we need to need here, we need to pass like this here the value, need to call here, need to give this here the request object dot, so need to pass this here the name property, then after need to give this here the request object dot, need to give this here the nutrition id underscore id, and we to terminate this here the api call, so need to set here, and we to getting this here the results errors and results need to found here like here, and this calling here this api, if here errors found, then we need to call this here the helper throw html errors, and to errors and response need to pass and terminate this executions. If here found this here the result affected row more than 0, means here the successfully updated this record, so need to found that here for this database inside the update this data against, need to returning this here the response, need to call here status, to set here the 0, and to write down here the message, and we need to set here 1, and to nutrition update success item nutrition updated successfully like here's, and else parts need to call here's copy, and to paste this here, so need to set here the 0, and to write down here the fail msg else, so need to returning this here the response, and this is the update api we need to done here. Now we need to develop this here the deletes api, we need to copy this here the update api, need to paste here, and to write down here the delete nutrition delete item nutrition underscore deletes, like so we need to give this here the api, and only we need to need this here the nutrition id, and we need to set here the status as we need to pass this here the 2, and we need to remove here the name like this, and we need to if affected row updated deleted successfully, need to returning this here the message, and now need to save here. Now another api we need to develop for here the getting this here the all nutrition list related to this item, so need to getting here, need to check this here the parameters, so need to need this here the items underscore id, and again to fetch this here the all items nutrition list, need to get here, you need to call here the select query, now need to open this here the query, select sqls, and to remove this here the created dates and modified dates no needs, you need to clean here, and also no needs here the status, we need to clean here, we need to cut this here for this query, and we need to paste here, and we need to set here the where conditions, and to set this here the item id. Again, so we need to remove here the not deleted states, we need to manage here, and we need to pass this here the item id, we need to change here, and we need to get here the results, and we need to set here the payload. We need to returning this here the payloads, as you need to pass this here the results, and this is the successfully given this here the getting all related to items this nutrition list. Need to returning this here for this response and terminate the nutrition list api. If you like this video, please give the thumbs up. If you're new user, so please subscribe my channels and press the notification bell icon. You can get every new video notifications and awesome content. If you have any questions, so please write down the comment sections. I will help you and sort out your issue. Everyone have a nice day. Goodbye and take care.